So we will look for characterization in Araby by James Joyce. So for characterization, we know our narrator. We don't know his name. So we'll call him the narrator, or we can call him the protagonist. He's a character with a problem. We could say he's childlike because if you have all these books, but you like them because of the paper, so we can say immature because he enjoys books. He enjoys the pages of the books, not the content of the books. So it shows his immaturity. He is school aged and still plays outside with his friends, but makes a reference that the career of his play was soon ending because he can be characterized as a boy going into adolescence, and that would just be a big way to say teenage years. All right, so then his uncle, pretty easygoing guy. He's not, you could say he's absent-minded because he forgot about the bazaar. We could say that the uncle likes to drink a bit. Wait, if I go down, ooh, here he was a little annoyed with the boy, right? Curtly. He answered him snippy or rude. But overall, his uncle was pretty nice. So we can characterize the uncle. We'll say he is forgetful. Forgetful because he doesn't remember the narrator's plans for the evening, and we could say and entertaining because he arrives home intoxicated and begins singing songs. All right, and I don't like that sentence, so I'm going to change it. He can also be characterized as the aunt. She is loving and caring towards the narrator. She worries about him when she thinks he is joining a fraternal organization called the Freemasons. That shows she's worried, loving, caring, any of those things. So those are just examples of textual evidence. Now, we have the girl who is causing the narrator all these issues. She is not named. And wait, one thing. Okay, Manga's sister came out to call her brother. We waited to see if she would go. She lives, it says several times, he says that she has a brown figure, but she is not a person of color. She would just be like a regular Irish girl. So you could say, and the purpose of that is supposed to be this is like a brick. A lot of these buildings would be made of brick. Here it is. I kept her brown figure always in my eye. She's kind of like blending in to the scenery. Like he's not actually looking at her. That's why she's referring to her as brown. That's weird. She never talks to him. Well, she does, but this is all she says. Like she asked if I was going to Araby. Araby. I forget whether I answered yes or no. It would be splendid. She would love to go, but she can't. I guess we could characterize her as, she can be characterized as friendly because she strikes up a conversation with the narrator about the bazaar, about Araby, right? Friendly. That could play into our literary analysis. Then you would have your conflicts, of course. Most definitely. Narrator has a conflict within himself because he has a crush on a girl and he does not understand what he is feeling. He makes it his life life's mission to acquire a gift for her at a bazaar. He undergoes an epiphany and realizes, well, we don't want to say that because we don't know what he realizes. He undergoes, we'll say, an epiphany and leaves the bazaar without getting a gift. I guess he solved his conflict because he's no longer obsessed with this girl. And then you could have narrator versus uncle. His because the uncle is late when the narrator needs to leave. That one you could say character versus nature. Ooh, I have one. Ooh, you could say, and this would be nature. So it's natural that children go from being kids and playing to being teenagers and having like love interests, you could say. So we could say narrator versus nature because he is struggling with the natural occurrences of going from childhood to teenage years. There we go. For technology, it wasn't, you could find it. You could find it. I guess the train itself, being on having to get the train ticket could be an example. That one's tricky. Not really a technology story. And not a ghost story, so not supernatural. Maybe you could say about the priest, you could make some type of like religious significance for if God is supernatural. We could maybe say this is a Catholic. The boy does go to a Catholic school, and this is Catholic. Ireland would have been big on Catholicism, so maybe the supernatural could be a God reference in a way. All right, mood. So this is how the reader feels. We can say definitely the part with the woman there is supposed to be. Oh wait, so it opens. You could say with nostalgia. So I'm older, so I could say the story has a nostalgic mood because the reader can picture their own childhood and upbringing. The narrator describes running through dark, muddy lanes behind houses. And even though not everyone did this, most people remember playing outside as children, right? So we could say that's the nostalgic. It makes you remember your childhood. That's a popular mood you can use. Anything that's bringing you back to like old times, happy times. And then we have him feeling foolish. For this part, when he's like thinking about her all the time, and then he's in the back drawing room saying, oh, love. It depends how you felt when reading this. I might have thought that this was kind of funny because he's just absolutely obsessed with this girl and he's a kid. And it's not like it's anything bad happening to him. So readers might find this humorous, especially when she's like, yeah, are you going? And then all of a sudden he's like, yes, I'll get you something. We could say that the mood, and I'll put this, some readers might describe the mood of the rising action as humorous because the narrator is so obsessed with his crush that he is acting in a laughable manner. There you go. But then, me personally, towards the end, I felt bad for him. Oh, and then especially Mrs. Mercer's presence, right? You could say Joyce adds more humor with Mrs. Mercer's character because she is there to annoy, or because her presence alone is so irritating to the narrator. And this part here, like, you guys have maybe all had your parents have a friend that you thought was kind of annoying. And then most of the time, your parents' annoying friend doesn't bother you. But let's say you're already irritated, and now that person is in your house, and you're just like, this is supposed to be the humor, right? Like, this lady is so annoying. I'm sure she's there probably a decent amount, but garrulous. She's talking about unimportant things. She's excessively talking. And to say he endures something, wait, I'm going to say mood. Readers may find this humorous. The part where if you have to endure something that's supposed to be like grueling, tiring, like, you wouldn't just say you might say you had to listen to gossip. You wouldn't say you had to, if you said you had to endure it. Long, strenuous, how would you say this? Long, strenuous, or exerting lots of energy. Like, whatever you're doing, it's so annoying. Or so tiring. Tiring would be our word there. So, and then for the mood, he gets there. Okay, he gets there and he, like, can't remember why he's there. That's weird. You could say that the mood starts to get kind of confusing. Like, wait a minute. I thought this kid was in love with this girl and he's been obsessed with this bizarre all week. Like, why is he now forgetting? You could also say the mood at the end is kind of sad and maybe like pitiful. So, the story's following action and resolution could be viewed as pitiful for readers because the narrator has such a bad experience with his first crush. And I feel bad for him. And then with the tone, I would say nostalgic, same, familiar. Like, this is James Joyce talking about his experiences. We can also say, so the tone can be familiar because James Joyce wants the reader to feel as though they are with the narrator, like watching this. And even though the narrator is all confused, the reader would most likely be like an adult reader. So the reader is going to be way less confused than the narrator, because the narrator is like an 11, 12-year-old kid. When you're older, you would know what this kid is going through. Imagery. You could find lots of imagery, especially, here's the best part of imagery. When he's in the horse stall and he talks about the odors. Ooh, very, very much imagery here. When we say, we pictured him in the streets, you can see the pig's feet, you can hear the noises. Even here, I imagine that I bore my chalice. This is like imaginary play. I bore my chalice safely through my foes. Like, that's something a chalice would be what kings carry, and foes would be like enemies. So this is him playing in his imagination almost. All right, this could be an example of imagery. An example of imagery is when the narrator is at the market with his aunt. And I'll put that there. Perfect. And then you can hear, see, smell, all those things. 5 senses. Oh, lots of symbolism. Apple tree in the narrator's yard symbolizes the Garden of Eden and the temptation the narrator feels but can explain other symbols. The priest in general, the priest, and you would have to say, James Joyce could have chosen any career for the tenant upstairs, but he chose to make that character a priest, even though we never meet the priest. Priests would symbolize the narrator's, we could say, religious guilt, and this specifically, like lusting or having a crush in this time period. If you look this up, Catholicism, Ireland was dating discouraged. Like, this would have been, you're not really dating. You would have not arranged marriages, but you weren't supposed to be with the person until marriage. So there was like strict rules and codes. Like, girls and boys wouldn't have been hanging out. Like, there would have been social norms. Girls' schools and boys' schools were going to be separated in these Catholic schools. And we could say the priest symbolizes the restrictions on romance if you're not an adult, a married adult. It wouldn't have been, like, teenagers wouldn't have been, if they were, like, thought to be dating, they would have definitely been, like, talked to, you could say. So there would have been no sex ed classes. We could say that. We could say, in the story is set in a time when Irish Catholic norms would have completely deterred sexual education classes for young people. So the priest symbolizes the narrator's guilt and confusion surrounding his feelings towards someone of the opposite sex. That's a hefty one, and then we could say Araby is a symbol, or you could put it as a motif. It could be a symbol or a motif. Araby is a motif because it is the title of the story, and as soon as the narrator learns that his crush can't attend the bazaar, his entire world becomes finding her a gift. And then we could say Araby represents the unrealistic expectations the narrator has in regards to romance. Most definitely. And I'm going to put that there. World finds her gift. And then, for irony, it's ironic that he goes there all the way there and then changes his mind. You could say the story is ironic because the reader knows something that this narrator does not. So I could say here, the text in its entirety can be considered ironic because the reader knows that the narrator is going through his first crush and trying to process his feelings. However, the narrator, they truly believes his world is crashing in on him because he is so obsessed with his crush. That would be good. Okay, and then an illusion, the books. Joyce references 3 religious texts that the narrator finds in the attic to add to the religious, you could say, tension, to add to the feelings of tension the narrator is experiencing. Themes, and then of course we could have lots of themes. The loss of innocence, we could say childhood inevitably ends. We could say realistic relationships versus falsehoods. Or we could say realistic relationships versus imagination. We can say triggering, when you're triggered and something happens, it makes it even worse. We could say strict religious upbringing can cause confusion for young people. That might be a controversial one, but that's definitely what James Joyce was kind of saying. Then you would have your allegory. We're giving everything a meaning. You could say that this story is universal. And if we're going to give the narrator, he would represent all kids, that young people that may have had a crush on someone that was unobtainable. Like maybe somebody had a crush on like a celebrity or something, and it ended up being unobtainable. So we could say the narrator represents readers that have loved an unobtainable person and lived to realize how silly they were. You could say by not giving the narrator a name, James Joyce creates an allegory where the reader feels by not giving the narrator a name, James Joyce creates a symbol that anyone, that we could say, that creates a symbol that unreturned love is a part of life. We could say creates the allegory that unreturned love is a part of life. Lots of figurative language. Was like a summons to my foolish blood. I'll put that. And yet her name was like a summons to my foolish blood. I could say, here's one, simile. And I could say, this simile compares the narrator as being so foolish, he is summoned by Nanga's sister. We also don't know her name, which goes to show how ridiculous this was. We walked through the filling sheet, jostled by drunken men amid the curses of labor, shrill litanies. I imagined that I bore my chalice safely through a throng of throes. Her name sprang to my lips at moments in strange, ooh. So this is when he's supposed to be praying, right? Like totally focused on God, okay? This could be a good example. So this is an example of this this is an example of personification because someone's someone's name doesn't spring on uh lips, right? That's not how people talk. This is an example of personification because someone's name doesn't spring on another person's lips. So then names don't do anything. You talk a name. You don't, it doesn't spring on your lips. So this is part of personification. It's giving a name, a simple name, like a human quality, the ability to spring, jump. So we could say that this particular quote shows how distracted the narrator was and how important religion was, and how important religion is to the society. Um, and when you're praying, like you're only if you were found to say, if you were in the middle of praying and then you started to think about a girl, if like anyone around you knew that, they would kind of be like, this is supposed to be our religious time. What are you doing? So this kind of shows how stressful this was for him. And there's a lot of other ones. I'll put more on here. This video is really long. So, and then I'll go through, if we were going to do your parts of the plot, right? You'd have to figure out the climax of the story. And we'll do that next.